Today, I'm going to start reading and annotating The Hobbit by Tolkien. Why annotate a book? Helps you remember it and understand it, allows you time to think about what you're reading. And also, I love writing notes. I love writing a diary, and a journal. So this is kind of like a journal for reading. I use a pencil and color pencils because I don't want to highlight through a page. So this is the key that I'm going to try to use this time. Red for love and loyalty moments, blue for any sad moments, green for important or relatable moments to my life. Sometimes you have to dig deep with an older book. Purple will be anything that I think will become a favorite quote and I could journal about later. Yellow will be world building for the setting in The Hobbit. And black will be any kind of angry moments that get kind of that emotion out of me. So I always start with a pencil and I go back and I usually reread a chapter more than once. But you're only going to hear me read it once here. So this is the first book in the series, The Lord of the Rings. This is called The Hobbit, or There and Back Again, Revised Edition. So chapter 1, An Unexpected Party. In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit, not a nasty, dirty, wet hole, filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a portal, painted green with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened onto a tube-shaped hall like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel without smoke, with paneled walls and floors, tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs and lots of pegs for hats and coats. The hobbit was fond of visitors. The tunnel wound on and on, going fairly but not quite straight into the side of the hill. The hill, capital TH, so it's a place. As all the people for many miles round called it, and many little round doors opened out of it, first on one side and then on the other. No going upstairs for the hobbit. Bedrooms, bathrooms, cellars, pantries, lots of these. Wardrobes, he had whole rooms devoted to clothes. Kitchens, dining rooms, all were on the same floor, and indeed on the same passage. The best rooms were all on the left-hand side going in, for these were the only ones to have windows, deep-set, round windows looking over his garden and meadows beyond, sloping down to the river. So all of that is world building. This is going to be the first home we're introduced to, and we have this idea that it's set inside the hill, one place with a one-story dwelling with, it says, kitchens and pantries. So he had quite a few. So I would highlight the front of it because it kind of sets the description of a hole in the ground, which we might not be comfortable with as being a dirty, damp place, as being a contrast to what this is, which is a very clean, comfortable walk in, a place that people want to visit. So this would be a contrast to me, because I do not like wet, damp things either. And then it goes into a description of the house. And all of that I will probably end up. So this is his home. It's comfortable. I'm probably going to go back and highlight that in yellow, but that's a lot of yellow. So moving on, once we've met the home. This hobbit was a very well-to-do hobbit, and his name was Baggins. The Bagginses had lived in the neighborhood of the hill for time out of mind, and people considered them very respectable, not only because most of them were rich, but also because they never had any adventures or did anything unexpected. You could tell what a Baggins would say on any question without the bother of asking him. This is a story of how a Baggins had an adventure and found himself doing and saying things altogether unexpected. Once again, that contrast again of this very uncharacteristic hobbit. He may have lost the neighbor's respect, but he gained, well, you will see whether he gained anything in the end. So that's a question for the reader, for you to think about. The mother of our particular hobbit. What is a hobbit? I suppose hobbits need some description nowadays, since they have become rare and shy of the big people, as they call us, and that would be us. It's capital B for big, capital P. So we have a whole grouping for ourselves. They are, or were, a little people, about half our height and smaller than the bearded dwarves. Hobbits have no beards. There is little or no magic about them, except the ordinary, everyday sort which helps them to disappear quietly and quickly when large, stupid folk like you and me come blundering along, making a noise like elephants which they can hear a mile off. They are inclined to be fat in the stomach. They dress in bright colors, chiefly green and yellow, wear no shoes because their feet grow natural, leathery soles and thick, warm brown hair like the stuff on their heads, which is curly, have long, clever brown fingers, good-natured faces, and laugh deep, fruity laughs, especially after dinner, which they have twice a day when they can get it. Now you know enough to go on with. So we've been introduced to hobbits as a contrast to us. As I was saying, the mother of this hobbit, of Bilbo Baggins, that is, was the fabulous Belladonna Took, one of the 3 remarkable daughters of the old Took, head of the hobbits who lived across the water, the small river that ran at the foot of the hill. So you have the hill, which was described to us in the beginning with all the many rooms, and it said it overlooked his garden and the river down the hill, and it's called the water, capital T, capital W for a name. It was often said in other families that long ago one of the Took, capital T-O-O-K, ancestors must have taken a fairy wife. That was, of course, absurd, but certainly there was still something not entirely hobbit-like about them. And once in a while, members of the Took clan would go and have adventures. They discreetly disappeared, and the family hushed it up. But the fact remained that the Tooks were not as respectable as the Baggins, though they were undoubtedly richer. Not that Belladonna Took ever had any adventures after she became Mrs. Bungo Baggins. Bungo, that was Bilbo's father, built the most luxurious hobbit hole for her, and partly with her money. That was to be found either under the hill or over the hill or across the water, and there they remained to the end of their days. So it's a little bit relatable to me that Belladonna Took met this man called Bungo Baggins. They got married. He built her a fabulous home, but it was partly with her money, which it said her father was Old Took, head of the hobbits who lived across the water, and then she ended up living at the hill. So, but it's partly relatable to me that says, and partly with her money. Mostly because finances are usually a joint venture in this day and age. So we go back to leading up to meeting Bilbo Baggins. Still, it is probable that Bilbo, her only son, although he looked and behaved exactly like a second edition of his solid and comfortable father, got something a bit queer in his makeup from the Took side, from his mother's side, something that only waited for a chance to come out. The chance never arrived until Bilbo Baggins was grown up, being about 50 years old or so, and living in the beautiful hobbit hole built by his father, which I have just described for you, until he had, in fact, apparently settled down immovably. By some curious chance, one morning long ago in the quiet of the world, when there was less noise and more green, and the hobbits were still numerous and prosperous, and Bilbo Baggins was standing at his door after breakfast, smoking an enormous long wooden pipe that reached nearly down to his woolly toes, neatly brushed. Gandalf came by. Gandalf! If you had heard only a quarter of what I have heard about him, and I have only heard very little of all there is to hear, you would be prepared for any sort of remarkable tale. Tales and adventures sprouted up all over the place wherever he went, in the most extraordinary fashion. So Gandalf is this adventurous sort, I'm getting the impression, if you've never heard of Gandalf before. And it describes adventures as sprouting up wherever he grows. So we have this idea that things are growing and happening wherever Gandalf is. And you have the group of hobbits, which are completely happy eating breakfast and living their quiet life, but not going on adventures, except for this group of hobbits descendant from Old Took, on the mother's side, might I add, who sometimes kind of go on adventures but don't really brag about it. And then you have Gandalf, who kind of shows up with Bilbo. So you have this anticipation that there is going to be an adventure. Okay. Gandalf had not been down that way under the hill for ages and ages, not since his friend, the Old Took, like the grandfather, died. In fact, the hobbits had almost forgotten what he looked like, what Gandalf looked like. He had been away over the hill and across the water on business of his own since they were all small hobbit boys and hobbit girls. All that the unsuspecting Bilbo saw that morning was an old man with a staff. He had a tall pointed blue hat, a long gray cloak, a silver scarf over which a white beard hung down below his waist, and immense black boots. "Good morning," said Bilbo, and he meant it. The sun was shining and the grass was very green, but Gandalf looked at him from under long bushy eyebrows. that stuck out further than the brim of his shady hat. "What do you mean?" he said. "Do you wish me a good morning, or mean that it is a good morning whether I want it or not?" That's kind of a relatable quote to me sometimes, because sometimes it needs to be a good morning whether I like it or not, or it's a good morning for somebody else whether it's not a good morning for me, and that's okay. So what do you mean by the term good morning? I like that quote. We use it as a pleasantry, small talk, and sometimes I kind of wish that there was a better adventure coming, or a more exciting adventure. And so that's kind of like a catalyst question. So back to good morning. Is it a good morning whether I want it or not? Or that you feel good this morning? Or that it is a morning to be good on? All of them at once. So that might be a relatable quote, which would be a green. "All of them at once," said Bilbo, "and a very fine morning for a pipe of tobacco out of doors into the bargain. If you have a pipe about you, sit down and have a fill of mine." You know, I find that relatable because sometimes when we're meeting people, I feel the need to provide everything for that person to have a wonderful experience. And so a lot of times I need to ask people what they have that they can join me. Join me if you have this, or come along. And it will be a good morning. "There's no hurry. We have all the day before us." Then Bilbo sat down on a seat by his door, crossed his legs, and blew out a beautiful gray ring of smoke that sailed up into the air without breaking and floated away over the hill. "Very pretty," said Gandalf, "but I have no time to blow smoke rings this morning. I am looking for someone to share in an adventure that I am arranging, and it's very difficult to find anyone." "I should think so. In these parts, we are plain, quiet folk and have no use for adventures. Nasty, disturbing, uncomfortable things. Make you late for dinner. I can't think what anybody sees in them," said our Mr. Baggins, and stuck one thumb behind his braces, and blew out another even bigger smoke ring. Then he took out his morning letters and began to read, pretending to take no more notice of the old man. He had decided that he was not quite his sort and wanted him to go away. But the old man did not move. He stood leaning on his stick and gazing at the hobbit without saying anything, till Bilbo got quite uncomfortable and even a little cross. "Good morning," he said at last. "We don't want any adventures here, thank you. You might try over the hill or across the water." By this he meant that the conversation was at an end. You know, I find that Bilbo taking out his morning letters, sometimes, and especially growing up in the South, people give you all these nonverbal cues that it's time to leave or time to do something else. And sometimes we would not pick up on them. I grew up in a very direct speaking household, and so it took me a while to learn all of these cues, but that's okay. So people doing something that signaled time for you to go or the moment is over, it's very good to pay attention to people's body language. And then if you don't, they get a little more cross. I find I like this about Bilbo. We don't want any adventures here, thank you. And then he tells him where he can go. What a lot of good things do you use good morning for? Said Gandalf. Now you mean that you want to get rid of me, and that it won't be a good morning, till I move off. Not at all, my dear sir. Let me see. I don't think I know your name. Yes, my dear sir, and I do know your name, Mr. Bilbo Baggins, and you do know my name, though you don't remember that I belong to it. I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me. To think that I should have lived to be good-morninged by Belladonna Took's son, as if I was selling buttons at the door. Gandalf? Gandalf, gracious me, not the wandering wizard that gave old Took a pair of magic diamond studs that fastened to themselves and never came undone till ordered. Not the fellow who used to tell such wonderful tales at parties about dragons and goblins and giants and the rescue of princesses and the unexpected luck of widows' sons. Not the man that used to make such particularly excellent fireworks. I remember those. Old Took used to have them on Midsummer's Eve. Splendid. They used to go up like great lilies and snapdragons and laburnums of fire and hang in the twilight all evening. You will notice already that Mr. Baggins was not quite so prosy as he liked to believe, and that he was very fond of flowers. Dear me, he went on, not the Gandalf who was responsible for so many quiet lads and lasses going off into the blue for mad adventures. Anything from climbing trees to visiting elves, or sailing in ships, sailing to other shores. Bless me, life used to be quite you used to upset things badly in these parts once upon a time. I beg your pardon, but I had no idea you were still in business. Where else should I be? Said the wizard. All the same, I am pleased to find you remember something about me. You seem to remember my fireworks kindly, at any rate, and that is not without hope. Indeed, for your old grandfather Took's sake, and for the sake of poor Belladonna, I will give you what you asked for. I beg your pardon, I haven't asked for anything. Yes, you have. Twice now. My pardon, I give it to you. In fact, I will go so far as to send you on this adventure. Very amusing for me, very good for you, and profitable too, very likely, if you ever get over it. Sorry, I don't want any adventures. Thank you. Not today. Good morning. But please come to tea anytime you like. Why not tomorrow? Come tomorrow. Goodbye. So we've gone from good morning to goodbye and all the various meanings of good morning and this recognition by Bilbo that Gandalf is this great adventurer and almost this fear of, I like the stories, but I'm not going to go on the adventure. Which is also very relatable to me because as I was growing up, I loved stories of my dad's adventures, you'll call them, in the military. But I was very afraid to do things myself. Kind of like an only child, but I didn't have any siblings to go on any adventures with. And Bilbo is also an only child. And so sometimes I think having a sibling is a great way to go on an adventure with someone who kind of has to go on the adventure with you because you're going to drag them along, and it depends on personality. But we've gone from good morning to goodbye and this maybe possible adventure that Gandalf is going to send him on, and I will stop here.